Je propose de passer à la synthèse. En fait, David Pritchard, que je veux présenter, parce qu'en fait, c'est un collègue Dave Pritchard, qui n'a plus besoin de présentation tellement il est connu au Québec. C'est un des auteurs majeurs sur la déontologie de l'information. C'est un universitaire qui est connu pour ses réflexions originales et critiques sur la façon dont fonctionnent les médias et les sociétés au regard des médias. Et donc, on est très content qu'il ait accepté d'être avec nous pour mettre en place ce programme. Et c'était sans doute, évidemment, la personne la mieux placée pour nous présenter des remarques de synthèse pour clôturer cette journée. Et donc, merci d'avoir accepté de faire cette tâche à la fois redoutable, mais dans ton cas, on est certain que ce sera remarquable aussi.
Merci bien, Pierre. D'abord, je tiens à remercier le Centre d'études sur les médias de nous avoir invités à cette très belle ville de Montréal et aussi pour le soutien financier, il va sans dire. Un gros merci donc à Colette Brun, Florian Sauvageau, Pierre Trudel, Bernard Descoteaux. Merci bien. I'm going to be brief here, so I'm going to speak in English because that works better for me. It's so nice to hear so many smart people talk about an important issue. I think we realize that fake news is no longer just a joke. It is something very important. I like the idea of not calling it fake news. I like the idea of computational propaganda, which is Oxford, and Kate Starbird used that term as well. We are entering an algorithmic society right now. So this whole idea of computational propaganda is something we should keep in mind. One thing that didn't get talked about today, but I think is of supreme importance, is the influence of fake news on the people who pay attention to it, the people who read it, the people who share it. Do they really believe it? Some of the presentations today seem to assume that the readers actually believe this stuff. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows because we haven't done the research on the reception end of fake news. We've done the analyses of content. We have done network analysis, who's linking up with whom. Do they just like the fake news and share the fake news because it's fun, because it increases the social cohesion within their groups? There's many reasons why people might consume fake news other than that they believe it. We also need to know more about the effect of fake news on political outcomes. Would Brexit have turned out differently without fake news? That's a really hard question to answer, but it's a really important question to answer. Would Donald Trump be president of the United States if it weren't for the very targeted fake news and ads that were almost targeted to individuals in very key swing states? It is, to my mind, beyond belief that the Russians had the expertise to know how to target these people by themselves. One wonders then where they got the expertise, and that's why I think about Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, who has significant ties to Russia, Michael Flynn, who was for a brief time his national security advisor, who has significant ties to Russia, and so on. There are investigations going on right now. We'll see what they come up with. But those are the really important questions. Do political outcomes change because of what we can call fake news or computational propaganda? You Canadians, you'll have a federal election in a couple years, right? Start designing your studies now. Start sharing your draft research designs with your colleagues, because it takes a really good research design, or perhaps more, set of research designs, multi-method, right, to get at this crucial question. Is fake news part of an information war between Russia and the Western world, and especially the United States? I don't think there's any doubt anymore. Yes, there are teenagers with no connection to Russia. They may be in Macedonia, they might be in Madison, Wisconsin, who write stories like Hillary Clinton was a teenage hooker, right? And you know, that'll get shared a few thousand times, and it's fun and it's funny, but it's not really what's going on that's important. What's really going on that's important, and Kate Starbird talked about this, you know, the information war. She didn't believe there was any information war going on, and then she saw the evidence. Evidence is a powerful thing. Nadine Kozak, from a totally different method and totally different set of data, also knows that this is what the Russians do, right? The information war. Not so much to make people believe, but to confuse them, to destabilize structures. And that can be very powerful. What can be done? I teach law, among other things. And so what can be done? I quickly move to that issue, as we all do. Media literacy, information literacy, digital literacy, that's great stuff. But that tree doesn't bear fruit for 10 or 15 years. We don't have 10 or 15 years if our democracies are to survive. Fact-checking, Snopes, PolitiFact, and debunking like Stop Fake News in the Ukraine, they're very rational processes, and they're good. All this debunking is good, but people don't like fake news. Fake news is not appealing because of rationality. Fake news is appealing because of emotionality. And so the audience for the debunking, the audience for the fact-checking, is totally different from the audience for fake news. So people like us like debunking because we tend to be quite rational about these things. We probably tend not to spend 2 or 3 hours a day looking at fake news. Back in the good old days, many of us seem nostalgic for the good old days when a few of us were younger. The 20th century, basically, the state was the guarantor of the system of political communication. This is even true in the United States. Freedom of expression was constrained. Laws about libel, laws about invasion of privacy, laws about intentional lies in a political context, all constrained freedom of expression, and also mandatory disclosure of campaign financing constrained freedom of expression. At least we knew who was buying the ads. That old means of regulation doesn't work anymore in the algorithmic society. We have these large multinational social media platforms that enable the use of algorithms and artificial intelligence to classify people and to try to control political outcomes with a certain amount of success by all evidence. An important part of what social media and other internet platforms do is they manage communication among billions of people. Think about it. Facebook, 2 billion people use Facebook every month. That's bigger than the population of China or India. Facebook is too big for any country, any single country to regulate. You can negotiate with Facebook the way we negotiate with another sovereign power, almost. We don't have good models for how to do that. What we do have, though, is that if speech on Facebook is to be governed, Facebook will be, at the very least, an active partner in that governance. We are moving into an era where the state no longer regulates communication, but we have private regulation of communication, with Facebook as the elephant in the room. These companies all have terms of use. Could governments negotiate with them so that they could so that the companies would have to enforce their terms of use? Could we require that companies refuse anonymous speech? I don't know. There's some opportunity for negotiation there between sovereign states and Facebook and its ilk. Facebook doesn't have to, at least in many of our countries, Canada and the United States, the social media don't have to comply with constitutional guarantees of freedom of speech. So right now, Facebook doesn't allow personally abusive speech, at least its terms of use don't. It doesn't allow pornography. It doesn't allow hate speech. And Facebook doesn't, Twitter does, but Facebook does not allow anonymous speech. Now, the government in the United States can't constrain communication that way. Our Constitution prevents it, and to a very great extent, the same is true in Canada. But companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Google could, if they wanted to, refuse to make this kind of material available. This kind of material. What is this kind of material? It brings us right back to the definition challenge of fake news. What is fake news? I'm reminded of the US Supreme Court Justice who, in the 1950s, struggled with how to define hardcore pornography. He looked at a lot of it, because that's what a Supreme Court Justice has to do when a case comes before the court. You have to look at the material. And he said after looking at it, he couldn't really define the kinds of material covered by the term hardcore pornography, but he said, I know it when I see it. I think fake news is like that too. It's really hard to define with any precision, the kind of precision you might need to block it with an algorithm or to punish it with a statute. But we kind of know it when we see it. The kind of notice and takedown system that Germany has just enacted, that the United States uses with copyright infringement, has some similarities to how people can have private information taken down in Europe because of the right to be forgotten. I think that's a very promising path to minimize the amount of fake news. Again, the questions of definition are daunting. But it's really important. These are the companies, the private companies that provide the infrastructure for democracy. From my point of view, this is not really about freedom of expression. This is about democracy. And if we ignore this kind of brave new world, this central component of our democracy now, this new infrastructure, we do so at our peril, as we're finding out in the United States. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for coming. This was really fun.